Good morning, it's Thursday, the 23rd of April. I'm Marit Gwyn and you're watching Europe Today, your daily dose of news and analysis broadcast live here from Brussels. Coming up on today's show, the EU is in the process of unblocking the €90 billion loan to Ukraine and fresh sanctions against Russia after signals Hungary and Slovakia have dropped their opposition. If neither country raises objections today, a months-long political standoff will come to an end. We'll have the details. And the European Commission has urged EU governments to introduce energy vouchers, social tariffs and VAT cuts to cushion the impact of the energy crisis triggered by the Iran war. But it stopped short of introducing a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. We speak to the Energy Commissioner, Dan Jorgensen. And in other news this morning, Lebanon and Israel are set to enter a second round of talks in Washington, with the Lebanese president saying Beirut is seeking to extend the 10-day ceasefire, which expires on Sunday. Meanwhile, a top Iranian negotiator has said the Strait of Hormuz cannot open due to, quote, blatant violations of the ceasefire by the US. But first this morning, the EU is expected to unlock a crucial loan to Ukraine and sanctions on Russia later today, amid indications Russian crude is flowing again through the Druzhba pipeline. It would come conveniently just before EU leaders gather in Cyprus tonight ahead of an informal summit tomorrow. For more, our Ukraine correspondent Sasha Vakulina joins me on set. Good morning. How has Kyiv reacted to the news of the unblocking of this loan?
Kyiv is really excited to get this loan after it was agreed in December, Marit, because for Ukraine, this is really important and crucial, as you said, financial lifetime for the country to cover the Ukraine's financial needs this year and also next year, with 2/3 of those 90 billion loan going into Ukraine defense needs that it desperately needs as soon as possible. Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky reacted to it, saying the implementation of our agreement with the European Union to unblock the 90 billion support package for Ukraine over 2 years is now effectively underway, as well as the new sanctions package against Russia over this war. The unblocking is the right signal under the current circumstances. Now, at the EU-Ukraine Business Summit that is taking place in Brussels these days, I saw Ukrainian officials literally congratulating each other on the unblocking of this loan.
And is there hope also, Sasha, that with a government change about to happen in Hungary, that this could also mean progress on Ukraine's bid to join the EU?
Absolutely, because this veto by Viktor Orban has nothing to do with the Druzhba pipeline. This is something that he's been holding on to from way before then. And yes, indeed, nowadays Kyiv and Brussels both hoping that this is the opportunity to open those clusters. And the EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Kos, also mentioned that she expects the first cluster to finally open the moment the new government, the change of the government in Hungary is complete. And this should be around May. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
Another good news is that we hope that with the change of the government in Hungary, we will soon be able to open all the clusters formally. The European Commission, my team is ready, and we hope that the member states and the Council will act swiftly.
Taras Kachka, Ukraine's deputy prime minister, who's in charge of Ukraine's European integration, speaking right next to Marta Kos, also gave some sneak peek regarding the timeline on how this process can proceed.
I hope that this year we will hear that certain chapters can be treated as closed. That also brings the possibility next year to talk about broad integration into the internal market. Maybe, who knows, that things can be really fast. And next year we will close all chapters, and then we can talk about the Treaty of Accession.
While those clusters have been vetoed and blocked, Ukraine and Brussels both launched technical works to make sure that as much preparedness is there. This is why, of course, the timeline that we heard there is quite fast, although not as fast as January 2027.
As Zelensky once hinted, Sasha, thank you so much for that update. Now moving on. As the situation in the Strait of Hormuz remains volatile, Trump has continued to lash out at his NATO allies for not coming to his aid in the war in Iran. Our correspondent Shauna Murray spoke with former NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen and started by asking him about the tensions ongoing amongst Trump and his allies.
I consider it the worst challenge for NATO during the history of a very successful alliance. So I think we in Europe should conclude we have to be able to stand on our own feet. So we should strengthen our defense, build on a coalition of the willing that could build a strong European pillar within NATO. We need a more European NATO.
You're obviously the former Prime Minister of Denmark, so you're European. Where do you stand then on the issue of European preference? Because the Europeans are going to be spending a colossal amount of money on defence now.
We should purchase weapons and ammunition where it is. Right now, because time is of the essence. We should reduce our dependency on foreign actors like the United States, but also other countries. So we should not be naive. So in certain cases, I would give preference to European weapons and ammunition.
Did you ever think you'd see the day where you're saying that you have to, that NATO should and Europe should move away from the United States in such a way that we need to be careful not to be naive?
For me, this has been a very painful process. Since childhood, I have admired the United States. I saw the United States as a natural leader of the free world. As Prime Minister of Denmark, I worked closely with the then President George W. Bush. For me, it's been painful to conclude that we have to reduce our dependence on the United States. But that is the state of affairs today.
And how was it then when you were watching what was happening with Greenland, with the President of the United States saying they needed to take Greenland, with the denigration of the sacrifices made by Danish troops in Afghanistan?
Yeah, but it was unheard that the leader of the biggest ally within a collective defense organization threatens another ally with the aim to grasp land by force. Had that happened, it would be the end of NATO. It doesn't make sense to have a collective defense organization where the biggest ally threatens another ally. Fortunately, President Trump backed off that threat, and now we have embarked on a more traditional diplomatic path.
The situation in the Strait of Hormuz is changing every hour, and the ceasefire looks like it may be extended, but there's no changes to actually reopening the strait. What do you think needs to be done now?
I think actually Europe should use this situation as a leverage to change the relationship between Europe and the United States. We should speak to President Trump the same way as he speaks to us. And that's why my proposal would be for Europe to correct the mistake they made when they declared this war is not our war, and try to get the best out of this for Europe.
Okay, just final question then. Who do you propose should speak to Donald Trump in the way he speaks to us?
Well, I would leave it to the political leaders to decide. We have, in the past, we have seen European delegations meet up in the White House. My point is just this. Trump only respects a firm stance. And that's why I say time for flattering is over.
Shauna Murray speaking to Anders Rasmussen there. Now we're staying with Europe's security and defence. Latvia is a country that sits on NATO's eastern flank and is ramping up its defence efforts. Joining me in the studio now is Latvia's Defence Minister Andris Spruds. Great to have you on the programme. Thank you for being here. I want to pick up on what Anders Rasmussen said there about the big historic challenge he said facing NATO. The US President Donald Trump is threatening an US exit. Is he pushing the alliance to the brink?
On practical military level, we had excellent relationship. There is presence of US troops in Europe, also in the Baltic countries, in Latvia, and we continuously, actively cooperate. So I see that alliance remains strong. that it is one for all for one. It is beneficial for all member states, including United States. Of course, sometimes we have some disputes, sometimes we have some statements, but I would focus mostly on practical cooperation, strategic cooperation. We see that cooperation continues as it was, even though, yes, sometimes we have some questions and some disputes to solve.
But does that rhetoric from Trump sometimes make you doubt that the US would come to Latvia, to Europe's aid, if needed, under Article 5?
No, my confidence is in the United States, in transatlantic relationship. As I said, we've seen this cooperation developing and expanding, and here I don't have any doubts that the United States would come to help. So even though sometimes we might have some discussions.
Very good. We know there's another conflict hotspot in the Middle East. Do you see or fear that that conflict is not only diverting attention from Ukraine and Europe, but that also there are weapons, US-made weapons, destined for Europe being diverted there?
It just once more demonstrates the world is interconnected, and also the armament supplies. It is quite in shortage in these uncertainty times, in these times of insecurity. So that's why, once more, it's just a strong reminder that we need to build up our own defenses, our own defense industry in Europe. We must step up. In the meantime, yes, we have to deal with some of the potential shortages. But as I said, I would believe this is not a game changer in terms of our defense capabilities.
But are you seeing shortages in Europe due to the war in Iran?
We might see some shortages, and some countries have admitted it, that actually there are some delays, but this is delay because of the lack of defense industry in general. So we see the shortage in general. So that's why, once more, we have to develop the industrial base, technological base, also focusing on new technologies.
I'll get to that very shortly, but briefly, do you fear that the war in Iran could be emboldening President Putin?
Well, of course, we must take into account that war is, in a sense, uncertain, that there are quite a number of those flashpoints, but it is also a reminder that the United States is ready to act, and here we should cooperate actively with the United States to solve the problems, solve the issue, also in Hormuz Straits, together, and that's what also Latvia has indicated.
We're seeing today that the 90 billion loan from the EU to Ukraine will probably be unlocked. How crucial is this?
It is crucial. It is crucial, and it's good that we see progress in this regard. It is crucial to support Ukraine, but it's not just about 90 billion loan. It's about bilateral supports. What Latvia is doing, 0.25% from our GDP goes to Ukraine.
And are
it's
all
also about
European
EU membership.
Meeting that moment as Latvia is doing. Do you think all European countries are doing enough?
I would hope that... and I would expect that there could be even more help, as I said, also on bilateral level. First of all, on a multilateral level, not to block anything what goes into the direction of Ukraine, because Ukraine fights our war as well. Ukraine defends our values and interests.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We hope to have you back here on set again in the future. Now, moving on now, because you might be wondering what the potential shortage in jet fuel means for your travel plans. Jakub Janis has taken a look and explains more.
If you are planning a holiday this year, you might want to check your bank balance and your flight status before you park. Europeans are entering what is shaping up to be a surcharge summer. And while the European Commission tones down warning from energy experts, the airlines are telling a different story. SAS Scandinavian Airlines have cancelled about 1,000 departures. Lufthansa has followed suit by axing 20,000 routes. And Air France KLM is slapping a €100 surcharge on long-distance tickets. So what causes this turbulence? EU refineries account for roughly 70% of the bloc's jet fuel, with the rest usually imported from the Middle East. However, with the Strait of Hormuz closed, the disruption to global oil transit drove jet fuel prices to twice their previous levels. And last week, the International Energy Agency warned Europe has roughly 6 weeks of supply left, resulting in possible flight cancellations. The European Commission argues that flight cancellations are not related to shortages, but rather to the airline's own lack of profitability. However, to be on a safe side, it launched Accelerate EU, a plan to coordinate emergency fuel supplies and ensure member states start sharing what's left in their tanks. The EU is also eyeing new imports from the United States. However, US jet fuel follows slightly different chemical standards. The European Commission is trying to keep Europeans calm, but the advice from the EU transport ministers, who gathered ahead of this week's summit in Cyprus, is a bit of a climb. They are suggesting Europeans neutralize demand by switching to public transport and electric bikes. And your reporter believes it is a noble idea, but you cannot exactly ride an e-bike from Brussels to Ibiza, or can you? So the energy crisis debate will likely be held today and tomorrow during an informal summit of EU leaders in Cyprus. I just wonder how they plan to get there.
Now, after 2 months of war in Iran, Europe is feeling the shock. Energy prices continue to soar, but the European Commission is stepping in with emergency energy vouchers and a new energy watchdog. For the details, I'm joined in the studio by our correspondent, Angela Skujins. Great to have you, Angela. You spoke to the Energy Commissioner yesterday. Tell us more about the measures that he outlined.
Good morning, Madrid. So there's no ambiguity regarding the scale of the problem. The European Commission has stated that over the 2 months that this conflict has raged on in the Middle East, it has cost Europeans an extra 24 billion euros. This amounts to an eye-watering 5 million euros per day. In response to this, the European Commission came out on Wednesday with a suite of measures aimed to support Europeans at the diesel pump as well as at the bank. This includes a new observatory to be set up to monitor how energy is dispersed within the EU, as well as energy vouchers for people to buy more energy efficient heat pumps, tax incentives for people to also buy solar panels. However, critics have blasted this, stating that it doesn't really have the financial teeth to support Europeans most vulnerable. It also included no mention of that one-day working from home policy, as well as taxing windfall profits. Euronews did ask the European Commissioner for Energy, Dan Jorgensen, about this. He stated that it's incumbent on national governments to establish those windfall tax profits. However, he did warn that Europeans should expect more pain.
Even in a best case scenario, I do have to be quite blunt and say that we are looking into some very difficult months and even years, because even if there's a peace tomorrow, to rebuild the gas infrastructure, for instance, in Qatar will take maybe years. So prices will not stabilize at the level they were before this crisis.
And Angela, you also had the opportunity to ask the Commissioner about the situation in Ukraine after persistent attacks on its energy sites.
Yes, of course. While we had him, we thought we would ask about the Druzhba oil pipeline too. There's that 90 billion euro loan for Ukraine attached to this major development. He stated that it's imperative Ukraine gets this cash. We know that 2/3 of this will be used to continue repelling Russian aggression, while 1/3 will be used to prop up the budget and hopefully make some repairs to that pummeled energy infrastructure.
Working with Ukraine on helping to rebuild the energy sector is quite heartbreaking work, because the Russians are brutally bombing the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. They've done so through the very cold winter. People have been freezing, people have been without electricity. And obviously it's an expensive endeavor to rebuild, and we are very eager to help as much as we can, as fast as we can.
OK, Angela, thank you so much. Angela Skujins there speaking to the Energy Commissioner, Dan Jorgensen. But that brings this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy Europe Today or want to give us your tips, get in touch by emailing us at europetoday@euronews.com. We'll be back tomorrow with another packed show as EU leaders gather for informal talks in Cyprus. Don't miss it. See you then.